Namaste and good evening, everyone. Namaste, Sraddhalu.
Namaste, happy to be with all of you.
We welcome everyone to our part 4 on occult sciences. We are in the midst of a very interesting discussion on the secrets of occult science, and specifically on the topic of hypnosis, and today beyond hypnosis, with some related questions and continue further session. We want to address some questions. Today I will start with some questions on our subject on hypnosis. Aditya is writing, I had heard a talk today which asks students to have a study lamp while studying, so that it becomes a subconscious signal to the mind that switching on the light would mean time for studies. A college had given their students a lamp labeled study lamp to be switched on only while studying, and found that all the students who were given the lamp showed significant improvement in their performance than those who were not. This seems to me like an experiment where a bell is rung before serving food to a dog, and whenever the bell is rung, the dog would start salivating, even if there was no food. Can such subconscious automatism be used to our advantage to develop a habit of concentration? How is using the study lamp any different from having a specific chair and time for meditation? Is the Mandela effect also related to mass hypnotism? So Aditya is addressing all these questions to Sraddhalu, and I invite him to answer.
Yes. It's a very practical use of the principle of suggestions or building associations, subliminal programming, or self-hypnosis, various words one could use. And that itself tells you that it's not merely a hypnotic type effect. Hypnosis itself, we must understand, was a first entry made by European science. I will use this term because Sri Aurobindo uses it then, in its first explorations of matter and of reality, starting with the assumption that all is matter, and then exploring further until it hit this phenomenon called hypnosis, where suddenly it found that it was unable to explain some of the things possible by hypnosis. That is, under hypnosis, a person could be made to do things which were impossible. One of the standard tests of hypnosis is the person under hypnosis is made to lift their hands and keep it vertical for minutes, for hours, and there is no draining of the blood. And it would work with all of us. Or the arm is told, the person is told, your arm is now rigid. And the strongest person can literally push and not bend the arm by force, which the same person in a waking state would be unable to hold with his own strength. And then there are degrees to which other phenomena also begin to open, including clairvoyance and clairaudience, which can be triggered under hypnosis to almost anybody. And so the problem of physical science, then centered in Europe, was that you could not explain this purely by biological effects because they assumed the mind was a product of the body. Sri Aurobindo wrote an article in 1909, I think July, where he places this question. He says that European science has just entered the first threshold of yoga through the gateway of hypnosis. And now it finds itself suddenly opening to a whole range of possibilities which it is unable to explain with its prior assumptions. He goes on then to show you what is the deeper knowledge and science behind of which his hypnosis is at best an entry point. In fact, in a different article, which is titled Man, Slave or Free, Sri Aurobindo deals with this whole question of science and physical science in Europe and shows 4 steps of how the science can be taken into a more spiritual science or a yogic science. And again, he uses hypnosis there as an example of the entry point. But the 4 steps really are steps which start with, at first, a phenomena such as hypnosis, where you cannot explain things purely as an outcome of gross matter. But then through further steps, he takes us to the recognition that it is not body which creates mind, but mind which influences body and sets up relationships. But also then, next step, the mind has the power to turn in upon itself and as if examine itself as if through a microscope. And the way you would use a microscope for observing physical phenomena externally, you can turn the mind to observe subjective mental phenomena internally. More powerful than any microscope. And then the 4th step, really, through that, having developed a certain control or mastery, the 4th discovery would be that mind is not only independent of matter, but that it is actually master of matter. It can reject and control external stimuli and defy the so-called laws of nature and so on. And I'm reading now the text. He says, this is the decisive discovery of yoga. Its final contradiction of materialism. And the idea, of course, is that there is infinite potential. By the crowning realization that there is within us a source of immeasurable force, immeasurable intelligence, and immeasurable joy, far above the possibility of weakness, ignorance, grief, etc. I don't read further. The important thing here is he uses yoga as the escape from this materialist model. Or that's how he describes these 4 steps, as an escape from the error or the illusion that the materialist model offers. But in this other article titled Yoga and Hypnotism, he goes much more deeply into the whole question of the use of hypnotism. I'll actually come back to the question, but first I will give this broad framework and then address the question itself. So he says, in handling hypnotism, the European scientist is still experimenting with something which is very superficial. But in the knowledge of yoga, this is very well developed. And the knowledge given is that mind has set a certain relationship of the body with its senses and with the world. Mind having set it, mind can change it. Of course, there is the habit of the mind itself, habit of the body itself, and so on. But since mind can change, he gives the example that sugar, which is sweet, the mind can program the response to be bitter if it so chooses. Because finally, this experience of sweet and sugar are completely different things. There is only a habitual association of these two. That habitual association is as if set within a collective consciousness or collective mental suggestion or habit of the collective nature. But since mind created that habit, it created the relationship and the habit, mind can also change it. Locally, that is within each one of us, as well as collectively. So what we realize from this is that there is no permanent association or binding association. All is fluid and mutable. Similarly, he gives this example. If my friend blames me, I am grieved. That is an association and not binding. Think about it. Every time someone criticizes, I feel hurt, I feel upset. Imagine how much of our life we have wasted trying to change others' behavior towards us so that we would not be unhappy. Think about it. I wish the world were nicer to me, then I would be finally happy. All these people, they're helping each other, but they're not helping me. That's why I'm miserable. All these are preconceptions with which we have driven the maximum effort of our lives to try to change the world to suit what we think we would need to be happy. And even after they change, we will find reason to be unhappy. When in fact, our reaction to their behavior itself was the error. That association itself could be changed by our free choice. And then they could behave exactly as they want, and you can choose to be happy irrespective, or even in spite of, or even because of their criticism. You will say, oh, that's such a nice idea that you're criticizing. Thank you for pointing it out. I'm going to change myself. Wow, this is so interesting. I'm glad you pointed it out. I can be happy because he criticizes. It's not difficult. Think about it. You set up unconsciously, subconsciously, or inherited, let's say, an association which your mind can change. So this is another example Sri Aurobindo gives. It's a habit of the mind, he says, nothing more. And in the same way, he says, although with a little more difficulty, the physical body's response also can be changed. Slightly more difficult because the body is more rigid, more obstinate in its, well, habitual patterns. Similarly, he gives examples of emotional responses, moral responses, cowardice, pain, pleasure, etc. And I'm reading, so I have to look at the screen. The point he makes, though, is not only all these can be corrected, but we have to ask the question, what was the means of the correction? After all, somebody suggested to me under sleep. That's what hypnosis is about. Hypnos being sleep. I'm put under sleep. I'm no more conscious superficially. And the hypnotist says, hereafter, you will find you will be always happy, even if people criticize you. And then it works. What did he do? Or he ordered my arm to be stiff and very strong. And it happened. Now, you could argue that the person has a greater strength which he imposed on me. But ask him to make his arm stiff. He can't. And yet, he had the conviction that if he ordered you under hypnosis to do it, you would get it. He can't do it to himself, at least not yet. So what is happening? Because it's not his will which is superior to yours. And this is one of the arguments Sri Aurobindo offers to make this. Nor, he says, is it that under hypnosis, you become a blank slate, where anyone can order you anything and you would get it. It doesn't work either like that. It renders the mind passive to the touch of the operator. That's all. And the operator's suggestion is doing something. But what is it tapping? At what level is the suggestion operating, and how is it able to awaken powers which you yourself don't have and he does not have, and no human being that I can see around has, at least, that I can see. So then he explains, all these are habit patterns. Sanskaras, the term in Sanskrit, old associations, habits formed by the experience in the body, heart, or mind. And these habits, he says, form the laws of our psychology. Imagine how much of modern psychology wastes time developing laws which are merely habit patterns which can be changed. They are not laws. The error of the Western approach to science was to take physical matter, first of all, declaring it as laws. And that came, by the way, from the old religious training of Christianity, where God made laws which you have to obey. So they transferred that, they threw out God and transferred that concept to matter is driven by laws. Someone created, no God now, but it's a mechanical law still. And then you transfer laws into the psychological domain and declare mind also is driven by laws because it's a product of body. And you can see all the errors which emerge from that. And Sri Aurobindo explains, the associations of the mind are the stuff of which our life is made. They are more persistent in the body than in the mind, and therefore harder to alter. They are more persistent in the race than in the individual. The conquest of the body and mind by the individual is comparatively easy and can be done in the space of a single life. But the same conquest by the race involves the development of ages. And so we come to something very important from the yoga point of view. Your mind can conquer your body in a single lifetime. And yet you were never taught this in your education. You were never given the means or the tools to work on this conquest. You were rather told you are helpless against your genetics. You have court cases in the United States where a criminal is let go free because the judge was convinced that his criminal behavior was the product of his DNA heredity, and therefore he was an automaton, unable to change himself. And all this coming from that error, which is being imprinted in the mass of humanity today. And it is such a serious error. Imagine if this had been reversed in you from childhood. At least start with your children or your grandchildren today. Start teaching them the correction and the change. And for those of us who are already big enough with that programming, well, we will reverse it today. And we still have the rest of our lifetime to work on this. But remember, it's not just mind conquering body. As we will see, there will be something still greater which can do faster than mind what mind could do over body. But then he gives a very interesting idea. The change in the race takes time because it is passed through inheritance, isn't it? So he says it is conceivable. I will just read then. It is conceivable, however, that the practice of yoga by a great number of men and persistence in the practice by their descendants might bring about profound changes in human psychology. And by stamping these changes into body and brain through heredity, evolve a superior race which would endure, and by the law of the survival of the fittest, eliminate the weaker kinds of humanity. Just as the rudimentary mind of the animal has been evolved into the fine instruments of the human being, so the rudiments of higher force and faculty in the present race might evolve into the perfect buddhi of the yogin. Now, this connection with heredity and the possibility to transmit a higher, refined, or freer play of consciousness in the body by heredity is an important thing which I wanted to highlight here. It suggests that in those cultures, in those families and lineages, in which some kind of self-development, not always using the name yoga, but some kind of self-culturing, self-development, even sometimes under the name of religion, sometimes even in atheism as framework, if that culture and refinement is transmitted, it goes a long way in assisting the change in humanity as a whole, as a species, as a race. I would even suggest, assert that all of us who find ourselves naturally opening to higher values without anything done on our own have inherited from our ancestors. May not always be your immediate parents. They may not be conscious, but their parents and parents have worked on themselves under various names and overarching terms of yoga, religion, self-culturing, self-improvement, driven by some inner urge to push forward the boundaries of their capacities and refine and uplift their consciousness. And something of that has been passed on in the very substance of your biology, into which your soul can now come with a clear aspiration and nudge and push material that is already sufficiently refined, subtle, conscious, open, receptive, etc. Think about it. Be grateful to them. They may not always be obvious within your immediate ancestry. And the fact that they worked upon it, let's say in a collective, would impact others who may not be working on it also, because on a collective level, our consciousness is linked. So a sufficient effort, let's say, and I will focus now on India using the word yoga. Those who have followed any kind of yogic discipline, not necessarily with a spiritual goal, just as a goal of refining the body potential under influence of mind, would have imprinted in the collective consciousness of humanity, not just India, but certainly stronger imprints among those who already have an opening or an effort. and leaving stronger imprints in those collective spaces where this kind of effort was made. Think about it, and think about what we are doing today and its effect on humanity. And for those of you who have children or grandchildren, there is a transmission taking place there also. Not always biologically, but psychologically even. So he says it could lead to evolution of the perfect buddhi of the yogin. Then he goes on, quoting from the Sanskrit, from the Bhagavad Gita, Yo yat shraddha sa eva sa. According as is a man's fixed and complete belief that he is. We have discussed this in the discussion on the faith. Not immediately always, but sooner or later, by the law that makes the psychical tend inevitably to express itself in the material. What is this law? Any change taking place in the upper realms or gradations of consciousness inevitably ripple down, because the upper is the cause of the lower. So changes there will always ripple down into the lower eventually. So that's the law he is referring to. The question then arises, is mind your ultimate force, or is there something greater? Remember, under hypnosis, what happened was the surface mind with its fixed habit associations was put to sleep. The suggestion from the hypnotist tapped into an inner realm of mind, which is more plastic and free. In the vocabulary of the integral yoga, the inner mind or inner vital. And a suggestion made there straight away allows that action to work even on the physical body, even on the surface parts of the mind, because those are asleep and therefore not resistant, not reacting. And then that suggestion acts in you, even post-hypnosis, to continue the change. The hypnotist tapped the inner realms of mind. But what gave the inner realms of mind the power itself? And then he points to something still higher, which gave to mind this power to shape itself, to mold, to influence. Mind as a creative agent for life force and matter is itself empowered by a higher will, a divine creative will. And therefore one can tap into that or call that or invoke that, except we don't have access to that consciously ourselves, nor the hypnotist has access to that. So the realm of hypnosis stops there. What one can access in the inner mind and inner vital and indirectly the inner physical. But the realm of yoga, Sri Aurobindo explains, changes this whole relationship, where an external will influenced you, your will in an awakened state, not asleep, fully awake, fully conscious, your will can act directly on your inner mind, inner vital, and so on. But, and this comes to the higher potential of yoga, your will can then call upon a still higher influence than mind, invoke its influence to act in mind and through mind, and therefore lead to even greater and more radical results than mind could, or faster than mind could. And therefore, given the lifetime we have left, whatever it may be, the action of that power can do far more. Nevertheless, I want to take a little time to discuss what is possible just with the inner mind. And then we will realize and value how much more is possible by that higher ulterior force which works through the mind. That's the phrase Sri Aurobindo uses. He, of course, uses there the terms Purusha, which is the poise of the consciousness that incarnates, and in Prakriti, which is nature, which is what physical science calls also nature and physical energy. And at that point, the identification is complete with the yogic science in that part. But now you have Purusha, and above you have the self, in which Purusha and Prakriti unite, where you have the total freedom. So we'll come back to a part of this text later towards the end. But having understood this, now let's look at what is actually possible. The question was asked about study lamp. And you'll see in the way this was done, you are told, here is a lamp which is labeled study lamp, a suggestion put into your mind. Each time you switch it on, you will enter the mode of study. Fine, I switch it on, I study, and when I finish studying, I switch off. Now I'm no more studying. What happened there was as if the person who gave the lamp, or you yourself, gave a suggestion to your inner mind. This physical movement switches me to study mode. When I switch it off, I'm out of study mode. In various religions, they would do the same thing without a physical object. They will say, before you start your studies, repeat this mantra. Now, sometimes the mantra has an invocatory component, invoking a specific aspect of the divine, but still, as a switch for the lamp, it's the same idea, but it may go much higher. So in India, you would do an invocation to Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, or some other Gayatri mantra, which would invoke the divine light on your mind or on your whole being. Or in some other tradition, you would pray to God and ask for help in your study or whatever work you're about to begin. And at the end, you would close with a similar ceremony. Interesting. So I saw, for example, in a Japanese Buddhist group, before those initiates were to engage with the lay people to help them in certain kinds of practices, they would all concentrate, repeat the mantra of their lineage, and make certain gestures with their hands, mudras, positions of the body. And then they would be kicked in, tuned into this mode. They would do the whole interaction. And when it was over, they'll say, okay, nobody else left. They would again sit down, do their mantra, do an offering of thanks, and do their mudras as if disconnecting from that. Now it's as if you have triggered by a keyword a programming, and now you have closed the programming. Except it's much more than just a hypnosis. If you have tapped consciously into a higher help, if you have not done it consciously, it would be as effective as a hypnotic suggestion without your knowing why. It still works. But I would take it a step further then, and that's the suggestion in the question. Can you do this with a specific chair, specific time for meditation? Yes, of course, which is the whole point of fixing a time or place for meditation. But there's more to it. It's more than just the hypnotic suggestion or this subliminal mind. Because you are building a presence, building a state of consciousness which is imprinted into that space. Not only for meditation, it would also be useful for study. So you have a study desk, which you reserve only for study. You will not read a novel. You will not sit in idle chit-chat on phone or watching a movie there. Because the place where you watch a movie creates vibes of those energies of emotions. And movies generally are intended to move passions. So disturbance of passions would be associated with that, or excitation of emotions. You come to study, you want calm and clarity of mind with your emotions completely still. So ensure you have a separate space. It does not have to be a separate table and chair even. Sometimes you can associate it with a rug. So let's say the house is small or the room is shared by several people. We can't each have our own separate study space, but you can each have a little prayer mat or study mat, or even skipping all that, just entering that space, switching into the mood of study consciously. You say, now I'm going to study, and I push away everything else. See, these are the methods of yogic skill. I push away everything else and I will only study. Even if other interruptions come, I am as if a different person. I am not affected. And when I complete, I consciously close that. All right, now I've finished. I close the book, put away my pencil, put it in a drawer, lock it in a box, whatever. Get up and say, now I switch to whatever next mode I'm going to be in. In fact, under hypnosis, they often do similar things. You will be told, with this trigger word, you will now enter this state. With that trigger word, you will enter another state. And you can be made to switch states. So you enter study state. You enter learning state. You enter expressive states, creative states, whatever. You can play with these things. Not limiting yourself to keywords. They are only a help, a crutch to help you shift. You realize at some point, I can shift consciously. I can switch between two states. I can even merge the two states. And so this is how you will develop skill, starting with special focused states, then merging, then transcending into a state of consciousness of which you experience these states as facets, and you may experience their integration, and so on. How far can this go? So I will take a few examples of hypnosis. Last time I focused much more on the collective hypnosis, which influences our behavior. But right now I want to see what is possible as a human potential, exposed under hypnosis, but available to us through yoga. I've given examples of how even your perception of colors and taste and smell can change. But you can be made to be immune, not only to pain or the experience of pain modified, but even immune to certain experiences to a point where you do not even notice them. On a physical level. On a physical level, you could be told that from this point on, the color blue would become transparent, or a person will become transparent to you. Now, strangely enough, let's say I'm hypnotized with the suggestion that somebody next to me is now transparent. He puts his hand in front of my eyes. I will still be able to describe what is behind. How does that work? So on a very physical level, the inner mind has retained the image before the eyes came, and so can access that image and continue to see it. And so the hand is effectively transparent. If while the eyes are covered, you change something, I may still continue to describe what was seen before. Or, depending on the state of hypnosis, if the inner power of mind to see directly by clairvoyant sight is now awakened sufficiently, with my eyes covered, you change things and I would still describe what you have changed. Depends on the degree of hypnosis. But either way, the behavior is completely as if nothing has come in between, physically. Now imagine what it could do psychologically, which is much more easy to do. It can change also, as we saw, body strength. I have given this example before that under hypnosis, any one of us could be told your stomach muscles are tight, and then your body is placed head on a stool, feet on a stool with nothing supporting, and you can hold your weight. The hypnotist stands on your stomach and you can take two people's weight on your stomach muscles. You come out of hypnosis and there is no strain in the stomach muscles, no muscle pain the next day. That means your biology is actually capable of this. What is limiting you is the beliefs down to the the mind in the biology, in the body. How often are we using a kind of a self-hypnosis or a post-hypnotic suggestion in self-hypnosis when we repeat to ourselves, oh, I am not good at this. I am not capable of that. I will fall sick if I eat that. You didn't need a hypnotist to give you a negative suggestion. You are giving it to yourself all the time, isn't it? Sometimes you got it from others, from parents even. Parents might have told you, don't get wet in the rain, you will catch a cold. Or advertisements have told you this. You have accepted it and then you have repeated it to yourself. As an idea, perhaps not always with words. But that conviction is deeply seated in the mind that is embedded in the body. To an extent that you have forgotten, and like a post-hypnotic suggestion, it acts. I would go so far as to say, even those of you who will claim that eating such a food gives you stomach upset is a post-hypnotic suggestion. Your body is capable of changing that relationship. In fact, you could be told this is a different object, and if you're convinced it is different, you might not get any reaction. Or if the mind in the body is deeply enough convinced of the opposite, it will still detect, it is that object, now I have to respond with a reaction. But if you could tap that level of the mind, you could change it. So yes, you could use hypnosis, but you could use your own self-will or call upon a higher influence combined with your will and intention, infuse that faith, and thus shape your body responses. In some of this, I am also responding to last time's question of A.G. Diges, who had wanted to increase energy and reduce the various body problems that arise with age. So I'm also addressing that partly, which I had not completely covered last time. Similar responses to healing. Your body responds slowly, well, because in the collective consciousness, in the mind, in the species, we have been told, aha, I have to age. With aging, my relationship with certain energy flows, changes, etc. All of which can be reversed. Various ways. One is indirectly, you are practicing Hatha Yoga, infusing consciousness in the body and infusing an intention in the consciousness. And as a Hatha Yogi practicing with that intention, your body becomes more and more resilient. Recently, there was a video a few days ago of the President of India giving a special award to someone who is 125 years old. The man walks into the room almost like a young man. He looks a little aged, yes, but his walk is almost as plastic as a young man. You can see the video online. He walks and bows down before the Prime Minister and the President, full bowing down with head to feet. And you do not see any lack of suppleness, just a little bit of oddity in fluidity of movement, by which you know it's an aged person. But looking at his behavior, you would say he would be in his late 70s perhaps, but he's 125. What does he do? He eats healthy. He does his Hatha Yoga practices every day. That's about it. No obvious spiritual component. I said not obvious because he doesn't say it, but obviously to my consciousness, at least, it was obvious that there is one, part of his religious tradition perhaps. But infused in the practice is this intention. My body will be healthy as a result of these practices. So the faith transmitted in the lineage is also extremely helpful. When your lineage tells you, do this every day and you will find that you will be very strong. In our childhood, we were taught Surya Namaskar, sun salutations, as it is translated, 12 stages where you do the cycle. And my mother taught the recitation to be done before. And the procedure was like this. You take a bowl of water and you do it as the sun is rising. So you place the bowl of water so that the sunlight, the early tender rays of the sun may infuse into the water and accumulate nourishment, strength, vitality, life force. Now there's a whole rationale behind that, which even without knowing it, just the belief would have a huge effect. But the rationale we accept that there is something being infused. And then you bow before the sun. The whole relationship is set with the sun. It's not just sun salutation as an idea. Today, people do it in their yoga rooms, yoga studios, facing any direction. But think about what it would mean doing it in front of the sun with a physical relationship to the sun, tapping into the physical vibration. And then you do the 12 cycles 12 times. And at the end of it, you take the water before you and you repeat an affirmation. Well, it's a prayer, but it's an affirmation in the modern psychology vocabulary, which goes something like this, that those who repeat this and do this practice every day, we will have health which is immune to all disease, freedom from poverty for lives together, along with good health, and this sacred water, blessed by the feet of the sun, I now infuse into my stomach. The word actually dharayam, contain, hold. And you drink the water with that affirmation stated, with the full meaning and concentration. Now, unlike modern minds which are taught to disbelieve such things, where you might do, or you'll say, why am I repeating every day the same thing? It's pointless. Get rid of it. Like in the wedding ceremonies, they say, oh, just cut out all the stuff, reduce it to minimum. Let's get on with our lives. But the content of the ceremony or the words have been lost because now you have no sense of its value. Something like this with mantras or such rituals. Infused with the power of your ancestors who have done it, infused with the belief and conviction that you bring into it, and then the physical attunement to the vibration. You drink it with that intention and infuse without doubt. The modern mind will say, I'm drinking it, but will it work? Does it work? Oh, come on. It shouldn't. It's just words I'm repeating. But if you had gone back a couple of centuries already, and of course 1,000 years before, people would believe it. Oh, I'm doing this with the power that it gives, and I will make my body strong. That pure faith, filling the body with the liquid that now spreads, has its effect. I do not know if that man does it. I would believe he would do equivalent procedures, if not this, and others. So what are you tapping into finally? Of course, there's a physical connection and access to an energy of the sun and the physical vibrations, but that energy is not gone. It is not dependent on just the physical sunlight. You can also tune into the sun as you are now, because the sun is still radiating and its energy is not limited. The most dense physical part, which is the physical light, yes, may be blocked by the earth because it's night now. But otherwise, the sun's energy is going right through the earth. And if you want to tap into your physics knowledge, you will say, right now there are neutrinos bursting through your body coming from the sun. That's the life force of the sun coming in the form of neutrinos. My body can absorb it, right? But they pass right through. And I will choose to absorb and receive the sun's energy. And you will have some effect on a finer grade. Do it on a very physical level, you will have also benefit of the physical energy. The result will be your body will become resilient. So there are many processes. The essence of them all is the faith and the attunement to a higher influence, which is able to override these old habits of body, mind, and the relationships imprinted. You can change, you can heal, similarly, accelerate healing. I've given many examples in the last few months, so I won't repeat those. You can modify hunger. Under hypnosis, you could be told, here is an apple, and all I'm doing is an empty air. The person sees the apple, takes it, bites. Oh, it's delicious. Chews and swallows. At the end of having eaten this virtual apple, the person feels full. I don't need to eat more. And what is surprising is that the person does not lose weight for a pretty long time. As long as the body is convinced it has eaten, or the body could be told, well, you won't feel hunger, except when I decide. And you can switch on your hunger, switch off your hunger at will, or choose to reduce the need for food and absorb more from the same quantum of food, and so on. Pushing further the boundaries through hypnosis alone, we find that we can even awaken clairvoyance, clairaudience, remote viewing, and other such powers, telepathic reception, transmission. And if they could be done under hypnosis, they can be done directly by your access to your own inner subliminal ranges. But, and this is where the limitation comes, you cannot tap into powers which belong to a higher state of consciousness, or experiences that belong to the higher, which you have not yet developed. Or you can tap into what you have already developed of the higher, but it will stop there. So under hypnosis, for example, we could ask you to recall a certain state of exalted consciousness, which you had sometime, even if not in this life. And you could re-enter or have access to that state, but not more than what you have already evolved. Unless the hypnotist had access to that, in which case there is a transmission, or unless under hypnosis you were opened to receive that which is higher, which you could do even now in a waking state or in a state of meditation. So at some point you ask yourself, what is the benefit? Yes, it can be useful, as long as you need external support to bypass your own limitations. Yes, it could be useful, with all the dangers we have already spoken of before. But in terms of the yoga, you have access to far greater help, not some other human with an ego who could interfere or limit even what is awakened in you, but directly to the divine who is right here, right now, willing to give you everything. and ask that help. The actual mechanism being what it is, that can change your mind, and of course, all the rest. So coming now to the working of the hypnotic process, we see that not only mind can change, but there are certain grooves nature has formed for these links. And I will point to a few which are embedded in our biology almost. So certain animals are very suggestible to hypnosis using biological, physical processes. Of course, by injecting certain chemicals, you enter a state of receptive suggestibility. But there are also physical procedures. For example, they say this in the books, I have never tried it, that if you take a chicken, a hen, make the head bend so that the tip of the beak touches the ground, place your finger at the beak, and then draw a straight line. So it sees your fingers, and then it stays stuck. It's in a state of hypnosis. Interesting. All you did was draw a line in front, and the chicken stays like that. Then, as you're told, again, I have not seen it, the hypnotist claps, makes a loud sound, the chicken wakes up in a shock and starts fluttering around. If this is biologically rooted, there would be similar equivalent pathways of suggestibility, even in more developed animals, as it is with human beings. And often the strain in the eyes are used for that. We find, for example, that flickering lights tend to make us feel a bit queasy or can put us in a state of sleepiness. There are certain frequencies which are more suggestible, and this is all tied to the natural rhythms of the brain waves. So a whole series of technologies have been built around that. If you know that your waking state, your brain pulses at a certain frequency, and in your sleep state, it pulses at a different frequency, and in deep sleep, it pulses at a different frequency. I keep confusing the terms, alpha waves, beta waves, theta waves. I forget which is which, because it's an odd sequence based on some historical naming. But what is important is if you pulse lights at those frequencies, the mind then slips into those states, half sleep or deep sleep, while you're awake. So you are as if hypnotized. Your eyes are open, you can respond, but your brain is pulsing at a level of deep sleep concentration. And so anything spoken at that point goes deep into you as if a hypnotic suggestion. And so there are technologies built around this. I mentioned how certain chemicals also have a similar effect. And the CIA worked upon this using LSD, and the whole experimenting which was done in the 50s and 60s around these drugs was for this purpose, to see what drugs could be used to put under a person under deep hypnotic state or suggestible state where you could just program them or reprogram them. The goal for them was military, to control an individual. But this was the original purpose of these designer drugs, not to give you highs, not for entertainment. They were then put out into the younger generations because that was the goal, to put suggestions in the collective consciousness and have the younger people now shape their lives along those suggestions, to make a mass of humanity that is, well, a puppet to those who would choose to control them. Similarly, certain chemicals, when they are in the biology, in the bloodstream, or particularly when they cross the blood-brain barrier, can make the brain, physical brain more receptive and suggestible. They found, for example, when fluoride was being used in Germany just before the Second World War to delouse homes, to, what's the word, to kill the insects in a house. So they would put the gas, certain derived gases from fluoride, into the air, close the windows, and then after so many days, they would open again, and the whole all the creatures there have died. But what they found was a tiny bit of exposure to this gas and subsequently the liquid form made people suddenly extremely docile and suggestible, passive to commands. And then one of the forms in which it was used was to insert this into drinking water. So this was attempted during the Second World War in Germany with great effect. From there, it was transferred to the United States, and to this day continues in various countries where the government pumps fluoride into, in its various forms, molecularly modified, into drinking water at the original source of drinking water for an entire city. The result is all those who are exposed to that water become docile, passive, obedient, and suggestible. Now, in India, we don't use fluoride. We use chlorine as a gas, which does not have the same effect. So you would say, we are safe, or other countries which don't use fluoride are safe. No, here's the mischief. The WHO, and there's so much to say about what they've been doing recently, the WHO has passed an order to insert fluoride into salt, table salt, in the countries where fluoride is not added in water. The excuse given is always the same. In the United States, they said, well, if you put fluoride in the water, the teeth being exposed to fluoride will make the teeth stronger and it will reduce cavities. Why do you need to drink it? Put it in your toothpaste, brush it, and throw it out. Why do you need to drink it? It's not logical. But the common man, so brainwashed, believes it. Well, in India and all other countries which don't have fluoride in the water, they insert fluoride in the salt. So there was a time, initially it was not there. I still recall the time, well, suddenly the government at the time, and it was a hostile government, not really interested in national interest, they passed an order that salt cannot be sold by those who produce it. It has to be processed to insert iodine. Why? Because a few people have iodine deficiency, and so we have to stuff iodine into everybody, even if excess is more harmful. It was medically wrong. It was done by a brutal order. Common man producing salt, now they were just drying seawater and extracting salt, had to sell it to these industries who inserted iodine and sold you iodized salt. What they didn't tell you was, along with iodine, they inserted fluoride by government order, tracing back to the WHO recommendation. And the result has been that over these last few decades, mass of humanity is infused with fluoride for this single purpose, to make you more docile and subservient and suggestible. Another biological imprint is through flickering lights I mentioned earlier, and particularly certain frequencies, even if the frequencies are not so obvious, they have an effect. And one of the most powerful hypnotic tools is your television. And clinical symptoms of hypnosis are dilated pupils and non-blinking eyes. So you'll see children staring at television like this. They don't blink. And if you look closely, the pupils are dilated. They're all hypnotized. Adults, children, everyone, because of the flickering screen. Even your mobile phone has a flickering screen of 60 hertz, much higher, with less effect. You don't notice it because you're used to it. But when you take a mobile phone which has a refresh rate of 150 hertz, you notice the difference. Or if you have a television screen with a higher refresh rate, you can notice that your eyes are less strained. But a strain that you did not notice because it was subliminal and which pushed you to hypnosis. And that's the difference between a flickering screen, a tablet, a laptop, a computer screen, and paper, which is non-flickering. So actually, although under hypnosis, you would expect things to retain better, yes, certain suggestibilities happen better, but memory, and especially physical memory, is better on paper than in a screen, which is flickering. I'm placing these before you just to show you that the actual mechanisms of influence physically are in fact biologically rooted. certain food additives, certain colorings, alcohol, drugs, as I mentioned, all of them tend to play with this suggestibility, passivity, and obedience in behavior. Nature, as if used these means on some level to control you, to activate behavior patterns in you when she wanted. For example, when it was time to procreate, to trigger the estrus for procreation. The same mechanism which is used through drugs and other alcohol and other forms of addiction is really nature's pathways to kick in certain patterns of behavior which were so complex that they could never be transmitted in a non-refined culture of the human consciousness, for example, or in animal consciousness where it is not sufficiently developed. And yet you had to go through those operations to be able to produce a child. If you look at what birds do or animals do to procreate, it is such a complex process and sometimes so ridiculously stupid. If there was not a drive pushing you and a pleasure sensation pulling you, you would never go through it. So nature had to create these paths. The fact that she created those paths leaves you open to misuse of those pathways by other means. So understand behind this all is still the mechanism, the machinery of the programming which is part of nature. You are bypassing that programming or modifying that programming by hypnosis or by yoga. In terms of memories, and so this was part of the question which was also placed. The question was, is Mandela effect also related to mass hypnosis? What is called Mandela effect is just the fact that sometimes collectively we tend to have different memories. A whole mass of humanity will say, oh, I remember this way. Someone else may say, I remember it that way. Yes, it can be done through suggestion. In fact, I mentioned this last time. There was a whole program the CIA had developed to plant false memories. Now, the method it is done today is very simple. You make a movie of a historical event. When you go away from the movie, if you try to recall the historical event, the visuals of the movie, the sounds, that state of immersiveness and the flickering screen, etc., which planted it as a subliminal hypnotic suggestion, those memories pop up. The actual physical memory is forgotten or replaced by this new memory. And if there was no actual physical memory, you are convinced that this is what happened. The power of cinema is to plant fake suggestions, if done for that intention, or it can plant equally positive suggestions. But this is to say that you can actually, yes, fake memories through cinema, through narrations, through other forms of subliminal messaging or communication, even sometimes telepathically, with no physical contact. And this was shown, for example, when a hypnotist was told, so and so is a victim of whatever memory. Can you please regress them and extract that memory? Now, these people were not victims. But when the hypnotist was told, under hypnosis, the people would recall those events, traumatic events, abduction events, and other kinds. You could make up any memory. If the hypnotist expected to hear it, the expectation was transmitted to the patient and recalled under hypnosis. Now think about what that does for past life memories. There's a lot of scope for mixtures of various kinds. And this is just to explain to you that, yes, memories can even be transmitted subliminally by kind of a telepathic process. If a highly developed individual had a strong telepathic suggestion imprinted on a collective, we would end up receiving the suggestion and believing it. And in fact, such things are done positively and negatively. In fact, in various environments of business, a strong vital personality is doing this all the time. The so-called charismatic personalities have this skill really of projecting a suggestion. In the most advanced form of MK Ultra technology, a person would be programmed with a keyword. So I will give a physical example of this. This person was hired for some menial task in the US military. Under hypnosis, a certain programming was done that whenever the controllers would use a keyword, the person would go as if into a hypnotic trance and would remember everything that was spoken. Another keyword, and they would snap out of the trance with no memory. Another keyword, and they would go back into trance and repeat exactly word for word everything which they had heard. So it was the equivalent of a human tape recorder. These people would be sent to certain negotiations. They would sit through doing nothing, or they would be there as if like a guard or somebody serving food or a secretary taking down notes. They come back with no memory of it. Then they're taken into the debriefing room, keyword spoken, and word for word, everything is spoken or written out. Very interesting capacity. It's actually present in all of us to be able to recall everything, to forget nothing. But imagine how many times you have said, I find myself saying this all the time, I don't have a very good memory. I don't remember names easily. And each time you say it, you're confirming with a post-hypnotic suggestion of your incapacity. Instead, push consciously to try to remember and tell yourself, my memory is growing better and better. We come to the influence of self-suggestion. And you will naturally remember Coué. I've spoken of him before, but briefly to repeat in this context. Because Mother referred to him, and she said that she and Sri Aurobindo had been working on this individual in Europe to assist him to bring about certain ideas, to spread certain ideas. And later, when the name Coué and the form of the work was shown to her, she said, yes, we recognize this is the person from the vibes. But when you're working on someone like that, you don't need to know the name. In the larger universal consciousness, they feel each individual. I've spoken about this before. Sri Aurobindo's letter to Dilip Kumar Roy, where he writes, long before we met you physically and came to know you by name, we have been following your progress in life and assisting. So in that consciousness, you feel, this person is known. But because you are meeting on a level of the mental, vital consciousness, generally Sri Aurobindo would act on the mental or higher, not vital or physical. You feel the person, you have access to the quality of mind and the spiritual, let's say, past of the person in relation to this work, and the help given on those levels through suggestions, through ideas. And the person may not be conscious, or he may be conscious and say, I received this help. I know not from where. I forget the name of the Christian mystic who actually he came up with this idea of human evolution and evolution of spiritual consciousness. And then he said, these are not my ideas. I have received this from somebody else. He was not conscious. He did not know of Sri Aurobindo, but he came up with very similar ideas and suggestions. That's the work of the yogi, to spread out ideas and in a positive way. And the same thing, as you can see, can have negative or utilities. All these represent powers of the inner mind and the inner vital. Turn this now to therapy. Can you help someone heal? Can you help them wake up? Can you help them grow? And you have now a whole domain of possibilities, going far beyond the word hypnosis. You see, under hypnosis, the starting assumption is you have to go into some kind of a sleep where your surface mind is asleep. But you don't need to. You can directly transmit suggestions, ideas, bypassing surface mind by other means, as we have seen, without actual sleep. And there are many methods. There are many techniques, keywords. Neuro-linguistic programming is one of the forms in which today this is taught. Suggestion, mesmerism, fascination, charisma, vital influence, mental influence. These are all terms used in various systems, but they all amount to the same thing. A suggestion transmitted using vehicles of words or influence directly, or energies or ideas, but always something transmitted which assists someone or modifies something in consciousness. If you take a positive direction to it, for therapy, for healing, for reshaping your values, your context, even your memories and responses to memories, increasing awareness, awakening some deeper or higher possibilities, making you conscious of your own deeper and higher aspiration. All this can be done directly, sometimes in conversation, sometimes without conversation, sometimes by leading you through certain forms or practices or experiences, using at best words as pointers or keywords, but inherently being a transmission of values or influence of some kind, even spiritually, to help someone grow or wake up. And this is what I mean by going beyond hypnosis itself. There is no sleep involved. The person may choose to receive or not. Go to any school, any online interaction, any face-to-face interaction. This is taking place. If you're conscious of it, you can deepen and erase. If you're not conscious, it still happens. What is transmitted is more than just the words and the interaction. Look back at your own years as a student. Some teachers stood out. You will remember them and say, what an inspiration. If I ask you what was it that was inspiring, you'll find it difficult to pinpoint. At best, certain forms, certain words, the fact that they patted you or they liked you or they praised you. No, it's much more than that. It's the optimism that the person radiated, which awakened in you an optimism and a hope and an aspiration. That's why the person was inspiring. And your memory today, thinking of that person, evokes the same inspirational influence. Think about it. The person may have passed on, no more in the physical body. All you have is a memory. But in the memory is the vibrational quality, and the contact with that vibration has that effect on you even now. If this is the power from another human being, far greater is the power directly from the source, which was working indirectly through that human being, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to we'll go to the next question, and then we'll come back to this, or we'll develop this idea further, because the next question fits in perfectly here. Alina?
Yes, so we will proceed with a question from Param. When we use hypnotherapy as a tool for a client's self-curing or healing, can we connect and to and integrate with the Divine Mother's teachings and Sri Aurobindo's action of Shakti? Because the client might not know about Sri Aurobindo's or the Mother's integral view of life, and hence we might stick to the addressing the client's problem only from the client's perspective, which might be somewhat limited when compared to the all-rounded picture that we get from the Mother's teachings. In case of self-hypnotherapy, it helps to connect with the Masters as it is only for ourselves.
Yes.
Very complex.
I will restate that. So he gives also an example in case you are healing somebody who has a pattern of headaches, let's say. There are deeper issues. There are deeper causes. And one has to, at some point, touch those in order to get the complete cure. If you don't go deep enough, then the cure may be partial or may need many sessions to attain to the same result. So his question really is, can you connect it or directly integrate these larger teachings to put into practice? I would say yes, of course, you should, but not necessarily using a vocabulary which is different. The client may have his own worldview, used to a certain vocabulary. You can use the same vocabulary, but open to larger and wider perspectives. And that would be the better way. Instead of bringing a new vocabulary that the client may be resistant to, which may be too new or which may be difficult to assimilate, you take the same words and widen them out. In fact, one of the skills in what is called neuro-linguistic programming, the word itself tells you neuron, linguistic, speech, and programming. So through speech, you as if influence behavior, influence thoughts, and the idea, of course, is biological, but in fact, you're influencing thoughts. For example, If a person says, I tried that and I failed. You see, in the very word failed, the whole body slumps, helpless, finished, over, lost, done. I tried that and I found a way that it does not work. Let me find other ways. Perhaps one of them will work. I'm sure one of the ways has to work. The event is exactly the same. The words I use changes entirely my relationship with the event and the future possibilities. Someone uses this, last time I gave this example of suicide and other terms, killed it and so on. Someone uses the word, I went for a demo to my clients and I crash landed completely. Now the image and the word association of crash landed is a plane that has crashed and broken up. Now there is no plane left. There is no hope. There is no vehicle. There is no means to travel. Instead, you can say, I went there, I tried this, and I messed up a little bit. Or I could not align with their worldview. That's even a better way of looking at it. I could not align. So when I come back, I say, I could not align. What is the alignment required? And I introspect. I review what I did, what they responded. And I find, oh, I should have gone this way, not that way. You are constantly working to improve, to build. And maybe not with those clients, with new clients, you will now work differently. So the idea of neuro-linguistic programming is that the words we use, the images we use, the context we sets the relationship and the outcomes and the future possibilities, not only with that thing, but with ourselves. I am a failure in life. You can see how it is definitive, finished, no hope. I'm a failure, it's done. I've achieved, failed. Instead, you say, I'm still struggling to find my direction and purpose. Okay, better, but I'm struggling. Find some other way of looking at the same situation. I'm experimenting to see what works better for me or what is more interesting. I'm trying out, I'm exploring possibilities in life. Now, the word explore widens the scope much more. So, a therapist could do this. You take the person who's saying, I'm a failure in life, and now you take those words and modify their meaning. Change the context, get them to review, change the perspective. There are technical terms for this in NLP. Reframing, it is called. You change the frame. So if I take an object, this is big or small? Well, if you put a big frame, this is small. If you put a small frame, this is big. Changing the frame changes the meaning of an object or yourself, your life, or whatever it is you do. So a lot of this can be done simply by using words, changing ideas, changing perspectives. In fact, this is what most therapists are doing unknowingly. In fact, this is what is happening all the time in our life, in our relationships with people, and especially with ourselves. If you're brooding a lot of time, you're only setting narrow and narrower frameworks in which you drown yourself, or you set yourself very large goals which are impossible to achieve. And then you say, oh, I will never achieve this in my life. Why? Because you set infinity as your goal. Whatever you may do, you will never reach infinity. So you reframe, you make small steps and so on. I'm just giving these as examples. But all this can be done without necessarily using the vocabulary of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, working within the vocabulary of the person's religious framework, let's say. But redefining the terms or changing the words and say, is it really so? I had one example, some lady, she was a student, and she said, I'm in such a misery. I have failed everywhere, and I'm in the most lowest bottom of everything. I've lost all hope. There's nothing left at all that I can do. So I saw that the person who had brought her was restless and expected, and she was waiting for positive words saying, no, you shouldn't say that, which is all she had heard all her life. And everywhere she said, no, but it is true. It doesn't matter what I say. It is true. So when I got that, I turned it around. I said, yes, of course. You have reached rock bottom. There's no hope. There's nothing left. You're finished. She's surprised. Nobody has told her this before. I'm agreeing with her 100%. Wow, she looks like that. Now that you have reached rock bottom, any effort you make can only grow higher. It changed the whole perspective. Now you make any effort, it doesn't matter what you do something. You can only go up, you can't go down because you've reached rock bottom. Suddenly the whole perspective changes. So there are ways like this by which one can use words, and in the skill of NLP training, for those who really go into therapy with NLP, you are taught to watch what are the words that the patient is using, and then catch those keywords and then use those as hooks, as if to turn around the perspective and make them view differently. If you have this larger integral perspective of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, not only your understanding of the person's situation is more deep, more complete, but you have access to deeper layers. You may not be directly conscious, but you know there is a psychic being there. You know what are the things which resonate with the psychic, and you can bring those influences even as ideas, even as suggestions. You have yourself, even if you're not aware of your psychic being, you're aware that there is a divine presence within you. You can call on that presence and its help, not only to help you say and do the right things, but to assist this person who is in difficulty. So your framework can be much larger, but staying within a narrower vocabulary suitable for the person's belief system, you can still operate from this larger vision and open their vocabulary, their keywords, use them as gateways, windows to open to something larger. And of course, if you're working on yourself, I would say go beyond even the term self-hypnosis. You're working to open or awaken to your own deeper and higher possibilities with the divine's help, with the access and the mastery that your own psychic being can bring into it. I'm going to share with you a few personal, very personal observations, I will say. And the intention here is to just use my example to point out something which is actually universally true for almost all of us. From my childhood, I had a very strong resistance to past, including heredity, ancestry, not nation, that was positive, but lineages, and things associated with vibrations that bound you to inheritance. I had very strong resistance to past life. Of course, I know I had done things. I had even impressions of certain things, particularly in aspect of technology. Yes, there was a time when we used to work with these high voltage, free energy devices, anti-gravity, all those things were there in some distant past. And I know I've worked in those, but no acceptance of any memory of past lives. It was completely no. Entire turn of consciousness was future, work to be done, this, the new consciousness, the new world, the new manifestation, the leap in evolution. It was as if fixated. Much later, and I will say later, beyond my 30s, into my 40s, certain events as if made ready where I could say, yes, now those things are no more relevant. And what was interesting is after that, so even in people, perceiving in people, past was not relevant, just the future. But once that transition came where, okay, now those, so to say, boundaries or blinkers that you put on a horse, no more needed, it dropped. Spontaneously, very naturally, the perception of the past, let's say, trend of growth would be obvious. So in interacting with somebody, it would be obvious, these are the elements which are carried from past life. And this is the direction that they can assist in the future development. It would be just obvious. To my own sense, of course, the sense of the past also was no more closed. And the fact of removing it changed this. But when it came to turning in, what do I want to know? I found still there was this thing that said, no interest in specifics. Looking at it more deeply, the point I'm getting at was, it was as if a choice made on the inner layers. of the inner mind, but behind the inner mind, more to do with the what Sri Aurobindo uses as the term inner being, the part of the person who is, let's say, greater than this personality, the person that incarnates, so to say, the aspect of the self that supports. Something of that had chosen this, not that. Once it had done whatever it needed in terms of the current growth, it said, okay, now you can remove the blinkers, have a more complete vision, more complete experience. Still, there's a choice somewhere inside, and I'm now conscious of that choice that no, I don't want to know about these things. And for a reason, because it would interfere with the work to be done, with the priority which is to be set here. So I find it quite amusing when some people say, oh, I wish I could know what I was in my past life. What does it matter? Yes, you can know what you did when you were 20 years old, 18 years old, 15 years old, 10 years old. Does it matter to you which class you went, who were your friends, what names they exchanged with each other? Irrelevant. In fact, if you are old enough in this life, pretty much you feel what you were 10 years ago is not you anymore. It's a different person. So why bind yourself to that? Why not focus on what you wish to be 10 years from now? And focus on that, at least in that direction of consciousness. And so it's sometimes even, of course, there's a tickle in the mind where you say, I would like to know what I was. Having known, what does it matter? There's in fact a danger. And Sri Aurobindo refers to this in the context of hypnosis. He says that one can actually, in remembering, draw back elements of those personalities, reactivate them. And he says it's because our current personality has embedded within it all the past personalities as an influence. And you don't want those things to come because they will pull you back to what was, not help you forward, isn't it? And this is the point I was still getting at was the memories are held back because of a choice you made in your own deeper and higher poise of consciousness. And if for some reason those memories are needed, known in that part, which is the true wisdom, well, they can be brought forward easily because they're all available. Using hypnosis as a means to bypass the choice you made is an inferior way. Think about it. Rather accept the choice made on an inner level and rather align to that choice and the choice of this birth and the purpose of this birth and focus on the forward movement for which you have come. Isn't that much more important? For this purpose, you may use these tools of NLP, suggestions, mutual help, affirmations, repetitions. Remember last time, I did not dwell enough on that because the discussion was larger. On the two hypnosises that Sri Aurobindo refers to, one of them, he says, is repetition of words. Yes, surely you can use repetition of words for this purpose. For what? But be clear. What words? Be clear. And at the very least, stop repeating those negative affirmations which our lives are so full of. I cannot, I don't, I can't, I'm done. No, you're just beginning. Right now, you're beginning the first new step in your life. Where potentially, and if you align to the psychic potential, which is infinite potential, where potentially everything is possible. All the possible leaps of consciousness are waiting for you. Will you waste your time wallowing on past, not done, failed, insufficient, not good enough, or all the infinity of possibilities that's waiting? Choose. And choosing, commit yourself entirely, wholeheartedly, in all that you can be aware of in yourself. Turn in a leap for this. This is what I took birth for. All the rest served its purpose to help bring me to where I am. And if any element of it is useful for the future, it will carry over. I don't have to think about it. What is much more important is the call of the future and the divine world that is waiting. There's one of the messages the mother gave was this wonderful world of delight waiting at our gates for our call. Right here in front of you is this new world, new creation, and new consciousness waiting to manifest on earth, for waiting for your call. And you're too busy. What did I do? What did I not do? And how miserable I am about it. When everything, world of delight is waiting for you. So make a choice. Do you want to carry baggage? Do you want to tie ropes with weights on each of those ropes going back multiple lives, or even within this life going back so many years, that you want to drag as you go forward? Or do you want to let go those ropes? And of course, you're drawing on a certain truth of the ascetic tradition. No mother, no father, no child, no son, no daughter, no friend, no nothing. I am Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, Shivoham. I am the very embodiment of the divine bliss. Free. That is the deeper truth, isn't it? Let go of all those things. What's relevant will stay. Sometimes even what's not relevant stays, but let go what you can. Look to the future, look to the step ahead, and throw yourselves into the arms of the Divine Mother, of the new world, of the new consciousness, unrestrained. And those two words which I keep repeating, entirely, exclusively. Whatever you can gather of yourself, turn entirely and exclusively only to this. All else is irrelevant. Or to the extent that it's relevant is included in this, so I don't have to worry about it. Faith, the deepest knowing of the soul within you, knows what this life is for, knows that the goal is certain. Align yourself to that, cling to that, and then open to the source, the divine mother, the divine presence, which is all potential, able to shape you entirely. And the alignment of these two makes everything possible. Without limits of space, boundaries, forms, or time. If you feel you have less time, that's part of the mental programming. Commit yourself with the time ahead, commit yourself. And for those of us where the biology is somewhat aged, work on the body consciousness also to reduce the symptoms of limitation that come with the aging. Look at that example of the 125-year-old. If you could now extend your life, at least something in that direction, how much more you could use with the consciousness that you have now, with the awakening that you have today, and it's all waiting. But take care of your body and infuse into it a higher consciousness, a higher belief, a higher value, a higher plasticity and resilience, which are in you already waiting, but it to be infused into the physical body. Do not neglect it. You have to pay attention for that. It is work to be done in the physical consciousness. So all this would be the message of this discussion as we move beyond hypnosis. We will take up perhaps one more session on the theme of occultism, but there are many other questions relating to other planes and beings and perhaps power of rituals and stuff like that. But maybe some of that we will explore next time. And also the question of how to protect oneself where it is necessary. But I think with this, the theme of hypnosis itself, we can see is only a gateway and entry point to something far more powerful. Shraddha, the faith, the innate knowing, which now must be infused into all the parts of our being, all of our nature, down to the most physical cells. And that's one of the key realizations or the key perfections in the integral yoga you will recall from our studies of the 6 perfections. Let's take a moment to align ourselves in this aspiration and in prayer and conscious invocation to realize this aspiration in this very lifetime.